I keep telling people keep saying, "Oh, JD Vance is gonna be the guy," and I'm like, I don't know." If he and Trump have a bit of friction, which they tend to have friction already, and if JD Vance goes the way of Mike Pence, who's to say that Trump won't get behind someone like Rubio and make Rubio the guy?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Trailblaze. This is Jamal Simmons. I am excited to have my good friend, you've seen her here before, Amy Parnes, who is a political writer at The Hill newspaper, also the author of some pretty big famous books. You see them, one of them right behind her, Shatter. The other one is Fight, about Joe Biden and the kind of Trump election from 2024. But Amy's here to talk to us today about what's going on in politics, and particularly how Democrats are feeling about how they did in 2025 and what's going to happen in 2026. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Jamal. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It's always good to see you. Always good to see you. All right, so let's just jump right in. You've been reporting a lot from Democrats who have been taking stock of what's happening with the DNC, what's happening with the party over the last few months. What's your sense of how Democrats are feeling about how they did in 2025?
I feel like they started the year not on great footing, really coming out of the 2024 election, not feeling great, in the wilderness. And I heard a lot of griping throughout the year, but as the year progressed and elections were won, lots of big elections, the gubernatorial race in New Jersey, the one in Virginia, even the mayoral race in Miami, a seat that has been Republican for almost 30 years. Democrats are feeling much better. I wouldn't say they're completely elated by everything going on, but I think that they're in better spirits than they were at the start of the year.
Okay, so griping from Democrats, that's surprising. I'm joking. I
noticed I didn't use bedwetting.
Yes, exactly. Please be overused. But it's interesting because you know Florida, so you used to live down there. In fact, I tell the audience, we met in Florida back in the Gore recount, Bush-Gore recount 2000, when Amy was a good... a cub reporter? Like, was that one of your first reporting gigs?
Yeah, I was an intern at the New York Times, and it was my first real big story, other than Elian Gonzalez, which also happened that year in Florida. It was a double whammy, but
it did happen. I don't know if you were there that day when what was that guy's name? He was the fisherman, the guy who found Elian Gonzalez. He showed up at the recount and decided to have a press conference outside.
It was
what a circus. It was a complete circus.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Democrats won the race in Miami. They won the two big governor's races.
Yeah.
Have you been able to detect, I don't know, a theme about what they're for, or what the policy agenda is that they're uniting around, or are each one of these races kind of happening in their own silo?
You know, a wise man, you might know him, once told me that elections are about the future. Always tells me that. And that Democrats need to sort of pick a message, coalesce around it. And that is sort of what I think is missing at this point. I think Democrats are starting to maybe have some, I think Mickey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, they obviously were able to tap into this populism and strike more of a chord and have more of an argument than other Democrats in recent months. And I think that's kind of a start, but I think the party still needs to kind of formulate what they're talking about, what their message is. And a lot of people are telling me, Jamal, you know, instead of focusing on these distractions like Epstein, which is a big story right now, and everything else, they need to really talk about and focus on the economy, and come up with a 5-point plan, but not not so trite in that sense, but come up with a message and a plan about what they can actually tell people, what they are for, what they stand for, and that's really how they're going to attract not only their base but bring in other supporters. And I think that's what's needed, particularly as we look into 2028. You can't just excite your base; you have to go beyond the base.
Yeah, I saw a poll the other day. You probably saw this one too. It had the Democratic Party, or maybe Democrats in Congress, with like 18% support among Americans. So
Yeah.
while Donald Trump was super unpopular, so were the Democrats. And so maybe people are going to support the Democrats because it's the not Trump choice. But in terms of building a brand that's going to actually lead the country with any kind of confidence, it doesn't seem like Democrats are doing any making any headway on that front.
No, no, and they keep falling into the same traps in a lot of ways, with the Epstein files, and that's a sexy story, so to speak, for a lot of people, and they're saying, oh, here's another way that we can trap Trump and we can make him look bad. A lot of Democrats still think that this is something, that will get him ultimately, but I think that as you always tell me, it needs to go beyond that. You need to appeal to people about why they should be voting for you. And an issue like the economy, which is still the biggest issue, I think, to a lot of voters. I think that really matters to them. They want a message, they want a reason to support you, and it can't just be anti-Trump all the time.
All right, so one big question that's been out there, and you kind of alluded to it a second ago, talking about the Epstein files and
Mm.
trapping Trump. Do you have a sense that Democrats in Congress have any stomach for impeaching Donald Trump again if they were to win the House back? Is that a thing that people seem that they want to do?
I don't know if that's a realistic thing. I mean, look, they impeached him twice, and it didn't really get them very far.
No.
And I think, I mean, there are lessons to be learned here. You can't just, I think they thought an impeachment would be his downfall, and a second impeachment, and it really wasn't. And so I think that's why they need to really go more on offense and not just play defense and not just think that saying that we're not Trump is the way to win voters' hearts, because in 2024 and in 2020, I think 2020, as John and I, my co-author, and I mentioned in our book, we said that Joe Biden got lucky because the election was so close. And if Donald Trump would have done anything differently, he could have still won. I think Democrats got kind of caught in that trap of like, oh yeah, we won. We convinced voters that this guy isn't good for us. And I think that's sort of what caught them in this trap in 2024. They thought that they could still make the case that he's not good for the country, and people just weren't buying it. So it has to be more than that.
Let's just do a couple of things about people.
Mm.
Have you noticed any change in feeling or how people are feeling about Hakeem Jeffries, who's the leader of the Democrats? It seems like Jeffries maybe won the political argument. It's hard to say anybody won the government shutdown because it was horrible for a lot of people. But in terms of the political argument, it seems like the Democrats put healthcare right on Donald Trump's doorstep, and now he seems like he owns it, which was not the case before the shutdown happened.
Yeah, it was a very smart move, and I haven't heard a lot of great things over the course of the months about Hakeem Jeffries. There's been, a lot of people kind of down on him, down on Chuck Schumer, feeling like the people on the Hill had let them down, that they could turn more to governors. You and I have spoken quite a bit about that, how
Hmm.
governors can take action where people on the Hill really weren't doing as much. But there is a bit of a shift, I think, right now in terms of Hakeem Jeffries and what he was able to do with healthcare. I think that is definitely an issue, especially while people see their healthcare costs rise. I think that's going to continue to be something going into the midterm election year, and I think it's going to anger a lot of voters. It's going to catch them by surprise. I think people are starting to pay attention to it now when they see rising costs, and I think it's an issue to watch for sure.
All right, so let's play a little 2028. So we're gonna leap ahead.
Yeah.
Who are you hearing about? I always tell you. I think I'll just confess to the audience because it's not a secret. I think right now Gavin Newsom sort of has the pole position on the 2028 campaign. I don't know if that means he's going to be the nominee, but it seems like it's his nomination. It's his leadership that everybody else is going to try to catch up to.
Yeah.
Is that what I mean, how do you hear from other Democrats? What do other Democrats say about what they think about the 2028 field right now?
100%, Jamal. I mean, you've been on these stories that I've written about Governor Newsom. He is in his own tier at this point. He is leading the pack. He is in his own tier. People ask me all the time, well, who else is there in that top tier? There is no one else. I think he has dominated. He has continued to dominate. He not only is taking on Trump verbally and has done kind of a smart thing in that way, because Democrats obviously really want someone who is fighting and who is taking on Trump, but he's taken action. I mean, look at what he was able to do with Prop 50 in California. It wasn't a guarantee. People think that it was probably a slam dunk in California. It really was not. He had to really fight hard for it. He did it. He can point to it now as evidence, as recent evidence of something he did to move the ball forward. And I think, he has this email list this much coveted email list where he was able to build small dollar donors through what he was able to do with Prop 50. I mean, he is running a campaign without running a campaign at this point. And I think everyone is going to have to try to catch up to him.
Okay, so the other people that are often mentioned are people like J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore. The one thing that pops up to me when I think of all three of those gentlemen is they all have elections to run for 2026.
Yeah.
So this feels like that's getting in the way of them really making a statement about 2028 or really pushing back on Trump as hard as they could be.
It really is. I think it's handicapping them a bit because they're not able to really, lay the groundwork for that particular race. They have to take care of business before they're able to do that. And so that also frees up this lane for Gavin Newsom to do what he's doing. I mean, he's at the tail end of his gubernatorial time in office, and he's ending in 2020, early 2027. He steps down, and that is the perfect time. Timing couldn't be more perfect for him to end that and then come into, launch a presidential campaign that spring. That's when a lot of people, I think, in those early months will launch. And so, yeah, I do think that timing is everything, too, in politics, and it's really playing into his favor, too. I mean, I'm curious to see how Wes Moore is able to come out of that, how he's getting a lot of attention. You and I have spoken about him before. There are other people who are interesting. I just wrote a story about Governor Bashir, who is, doing some interesting things. He is now the head of the DGA. He's chair of DGA. So that's going to position him to travel the country more, to meet a lot of fundraisers, to put him in the right rooms, to meet people that he needs to meet. And a lot of people are saying he's younger. He doesn't have sort of the persona that Newsom has in terms of a fighter, but people say, don't let him fool you. Like he's going to be able to, he has that side to him. He's able to convince people in a red state to support him. He's able to be to show his teeth when he needs to. And so I'm curious to see if he's able to do that in the coming months and able to show people on a national stage what he's been able to do in his state.
So I'm going to confess that probably from like style and background, Andy Bashir is exactly the kind of Democrat that I would like to see run for president, right? Somebody who's run a state. He's from a moderately, conservative to progressive, just like a centrist kind of a state. But here's the thing. It feels very retro to me. Bill Clinton was the head of the DGA when he ran back in the 1990s. I don't think Bashir has quite the same kind of charisma as Bill Clinton, but he kind of on paper stacks up like Bill Clinton in many ways. And that just feels like, the Evan Bayh kind of, Democrat, Bill Clinton, Al Gore from the 90s, maybe even. And I don't know if that's where where the country is. When I say we, I don't know if that's where the country is. It feels like politics are just a little more, I don't know, bare knuckle, and you gotta be willing to step out onto the ideological ledge a little more than these guys are used to.
But in terms of mood, that's where it gets me. I wonder if it's enough. If people say, okay, he was able to be successful. He has a really high approval rating in a red state in Kentucky. He's been able to convince these voters to support him while also defending a lot of these issues that Democrats care about. So he's able to sort of strike the right chord, walk that tightrope, and has been doing it successfully. So if he's able to almost telegraph what he's been doing nationally and show a little more Newsom, I think, show a little more of that fight, get some of that attention. I think he's lacking there in some way in terms of taking on Newsom in that way. So I'm curious to see how he's able to come forward and break through. And maybe you're right. I mean, he could be retro.
So there are two theories of the case, and this is
Yeah.
this is the experiment that we're about to go through, right? Is most presidents, most candidates, new presidents, are kind of an antidote to the last president. They solve some shortcoming that people felt about the last president. So it could be that after, all this time of Donald Trump, people are tired of all that. And they do want somebody who's going to be more even keeled, somebody who's just going to run the place with some competence, right? And then they might turn to someone like one of these governors. Or it might be that the style of Trump persists, but people want competence and, kind of the policy agenda they can kind of wrap their minds around. They don't want the seeming levels of corruption and all the other stuff that is happening. And so that's what we don't know. We don't know if we want Trump, we want our Trump, or, in terms of style and pugnaciousness, or do we want do we want to put water on the fire? Right. That's what we don't know.
Yeah, and I was talking to John Morgan, who's a big Democratic donor. You guys might have seen his ads all over the country. He's an injury lawyer. He is betting on the fact that people are going to be tired of Trump and tired of all the antics, and they're going to just want someone who's stable, who can appeal to everybody, who can bring everyone together. And it's an interesting theory. I mean, I'm not quite convinced of it because I know that we're in kind of a new era. I don't really see it really going back anytime soon. I think especially with J.D. Vance, if he's going to be the guy on the right, he in some ways is a bigger firebrand than Donald Trump. And so I think a lot of Democrats feel like they need someone to really stand up to him, and who is going to be that guy. And I think that's why Newsom has the lead at this point, because he's been willing to, for years, not just now, but, he took on Governor DeSantis a few years ago. He's always willing to kind of lead the charge in that fight. And who's to say? I mean, we'll see how this all plays out.
Before we go, there was we did not talk a lot about Republicans, but I will say this to you because this has been on my heart for like the last week. You know who's in the most treacherous position of any politician out there right now is J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, I have no confidence, zero confidence that Donald Trump is going to be able to survive a year, 18 months, 2 years of J.D. Vance ascending to the heights of, possible presidency to the second coming of the Trumpists. I just don't think Donald Trump can do it. I don't think he can sit there and let J.D. Vance be the guy.
No. And I keep telling people keep saying, oh, J.D. Vance is going to be the guy. And I'm like, I don't know. If he and Trump have a bit of friction, which they tend to have friction already, and if J.D. Vance goes the way of Mike Pence, who's to say that Trump won't get behind someone like Rubio and make Rubio the guy?
And he's going to have to. Look.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. In order to be president, you can't be a backup singer. You got to be a lead singer, right? So you got to get up. You got to get up and sing your own song.
Yeah.
And so that means he's going to have to distance himself from Donald Trump in some way. I just don't know how Donald Trump is going to, maybe I do know. I can't see Donald Trump reacting well to J.D. Vance not singing the Trump song.
No. No. And look, he's already, he doesn't want to cede the spotlight. That's the thing
That's
about
right.
Trump. He's made the Trump 2028 hats. He keeps kind of hinting like, maybe I will, maybe I'll do this. And so as soon as JD Vance kind of comes in and takes over, as is the case usually in the final couple of years of a presidency, I think you're right. I mean, I do think that is where that is going to be a relationship to watch and see how, if it evolves into what, or dissolves rather into what the Pence relationship became.
Well, and I'll say this. Remember, Donald Trump is King Petty, right? So remember when he fired, what was his first chief of staff's name? The one from Wisconsin. I don't know why I'm
Yes.
blanking on his name. Anyway,
Yeah.
when he
Yeah.
fired his first chief of staff, he wouldn't let him get back on Air Force One. He fired him when they were on the road. It wouldn't let him get back on Air Force One. He had to fly back commercial because
Yeah.
that's how Donald Trump rolls.
Yeah.
He will find every little petty way to kind of needle you. And here's what I know about being the vice president, having worked for a vice president, is everything the vice president has is at the whim and desire of the president.
Yeah.
So if you have staff, I had a commission, which meant I got to have a good parking space and have be able to eat at the White House mess and like a couple things like that. He could take all the commissions away from all of his staff, which means his staff could no longer have parking, right, at the White House, which sounds dumb and silly. But Donald Trump sometimes could be a little bit petty.
Yeah.
And I can
We'll
see
put it
him
past
doing
him.
things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so really the person to watch right now is Rubio.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced yet that JD Vance and Trump are going to be this as they exit.
Yeah. It's going to be a wild, wild ride. So
Yeah.
we'll all keep watching, and we will all keep reading the Hill to see what Amy Parnes has to say. Thank you for joining us on Trailblaze, Amy.
Friend, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.